Welcome back to the Lucas Oil Raceway Racers Tribune. I'm Sean Chambers with Lucas Oil Raceway and the NHRA. Episode 3 of the Racers Tribune is going to feature Devin Isenhower. Now that's probably a name that a number of Division III racers will recognize, and Devin, no stranger to Lucas Oil Raceway, has been racing out here at the track since he was 9 years old. He's 23 now, and in his short career, he has made an impact not just on this track, not just at the Division III level, but he's accomplished a ton on the national stage. Devin Isenhower will tell you all about his career to this point and what his plans are for the future in Episode 3 of the Racers Tribune. Devin's been racing here for quite some time, not just at Lucas Oil Raceway, but he's had quite a career early on some big stages at the national level. So, Devin, we'll jump right into it. Right, you've been here for a long time, but you've really kind of grown into one of the most competitive racers in D3, and even on the national stage.
Yep, so I've been racing out here ever since I was 9 years old. Started in the junior dragster ranks and did that all the way up until I was 18, and then hopped into the big cars and have been racing here ever since.
So what do you drive right now, just for people at home who may not know?
Yeah, okay, so I have a 250-inch American dragster with a 632 cubic inch big block Chevy, and I run that in Super Pro and Super Comp, and I also have a 1967 Camaro Roadster that I race in Super Gas that has a 615 cubic inch big block Chevy.
And how long have you been driving those? Are those what you have been driving since you got out of a junior?
Well, I got out of my junior and I started racing the dragster, and I was racing that ever since I got out of the juniors. And my dad, he was actually racing the Roadster, and we were racing together, and then it came to a point where he said that he didn't want to drive anymore, and he just wanted to put me behind the wheel of both of them, and I've been driving them ever since. And I think he enjoys just watching and being the crew chief, and I think he enjoys that just as much, if not more, than being the driver.
I think most dads are like that,
yeah,
right? Especially as I mean, I'm not a father, right? But I think as kids grow up, right, they they're just as happy, if not more happy, to see their children succeed. Yep. And now you've got I know we haven't quite got into all your story yet, but I know Nick is in a dragster for the first time this year. Nick's your brother. You grew up driving juniors here as well. Took some time off, right? So now you kind of got a little bit of a family affair going on with everybody at the track, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that came from when we were racing juniors. My dad, he was the crew chief, and obviously he was not able to drive a junior dragster, so he spent about 10 years just being our crew chief, and that's what he was kind of used to. And when he started racing himself, I think it was a little bit. He raced before we raced juniors, but I think it was just he wasn't used to it.
So let's get into some of your successes, right? I mean, juniors are they're very different, right? I mean, you're talking, especially when you go, you were driving in juniors until you were 18, and then just a couple of years later, right? We're talking Wally's at the U.S. Nationals, right? So what was first of all, tell me a little bit about how you did as a junior, right? Were you successful, right? Were you anticipating, right, a successful career after juniors? How did juniors go for you?
Yeah, I was. I think I was successful in a junior. I had success in juniors, and I don't think I was slouched on by anybody in juniors. So yeah, I learned a lot in juniors. That's how I am the racer I am today, and that's how I learned the fundamentals, and that's how I learned different strategies. And so without juniors, I definitely would not be where I'm at today and know what I know today.
And what was kind of the motivation behind, I mean, did you know, right, come 18 years old, right, and you were running at the end of your junior career, did you know, right, you were gonna make a real shot at some of the Lucas Oil stuff?
For sure, yeah. We'd been thinking about it for a while, and as I was getting older, the anticipation of getting into a bigger car that goes faster, that kept growing. So we were talking about it the entire year that I was my final year. So it was definitely, we knew that we were stepping up to the big cars.
So I'm gonna I want to get a little bit of story time from Devin here, because as it's one thing to win on the biggest stages, it's another thing to kind of be ingrained in those big stages from early on, right? I mean, you grew up here, right? And the U.S. Nationals is here every year. People come from all over the world, right? Yeah. So I want you to just kind of take, that from the time you turned 18, you stepped into one of the big cars, right? To kind of where you are now. Tell me a little bit about what you won, how it felt, how you got there, kind of what the future plans are, right? Tell me about how Devin's career is turning out now.
Yeah, okay, so when I turned 18, I was just finishing high school, and I didn't have a full-time job as I just graduated, and I was able to take the time to race more often with my family. So my first year of racing big cars, it was more just here locally, getting my feet wet, and then the following year we started to run the Division 3 series, all the local races in the Division 3, and I actually won the Super Gas Championship in the Division 3 ranks. So after that year, that was 2017, we decided the following year that we were going to race for the national championship. So since I was still a young person, I didn't have a full-time job, so I was still in school, going to college. I had the time and the ability to be able to run for a national championship. So that's what we did, and we had a good year in 2017. Won the Division 3 championship, and came out in 2018 and won the Division 3 championship again, as well as the national championship. So that's kind of where I'm at today. Last year we did we tried to go for it again, but didn't have as much success. Had a lot of hopes because of how good the 2018 year was. But now that I'm graduated from college, I actually start my full-time job on Monday as a product engineer, so I'm really looking forward to that. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So my racing is going to be stepping back a little bit. I'm not going to be able to take all this time off to be able to go run a national event that starts on Wednesday. But so for the next couple of years, I'm going to be focusing on my job and working up my vacation time and whatnot to be able to eventually come back to run for a national championship again at some point.
So what's it? I mean, you talk about Division 3, and I think Division 3 kind of has that reputation of there's some pretty stout competition here around the Midwest.
The land of the winners. Yeah,
exactly. And so I've never taken a tree, right? I mean, you can see the tree behind us. I've never been in a race car and taken the tree, but I'm gonna guess, right? Just as sports are in general, you see some of the best, athletes, or in this case, race car drivers, come up against you. You have some insight beforehand what might happen, right? Like there's some, especially you get some of the older individuals that have been doing this for a long time. They kind of have the expectation that a young buck comes up in the lane next to them, that it might be an easy run for him, right? And so what's that feeling like, knowing that you're a teenager, right? You haven't even hit 20 yet.
Well, I'm 20.
Well,
23.
At the time,
at the time.
And at the time, you haven't hit 20 yet, and you're winning a national championship. What's that feeling like?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, winning is great, but a big thing that I like is to be respected by my fellow racers. A lot of the people that run the Supercomp, Super Gas, they're the age, the demographics is an older age. So my goal is to be respected by them, and for them to not take me lightly, and to give me respect, and I give them respect back. Sure. So with racing those type of people, like people that are older, there's really a lot of different types of people that run Supercomp, Super Gas, which brings a lot of different strategies, and some people and how they run, and other people and how they run, and you have to take that into account when you're racing them.
You brought up a really interesting point, and it's kind of the flip side of what I asked, where you're young, but you still have to give some of those other older individuals who've been around some respect, right? And you get that in every sport, right? Where there's that. I mean, there's everyone always says, the passing of the torch, right? And not to say that anybody passed the torch to you or you took it or whatever the case is, but there's still those older individuals that, in some cases, you probably grew up watching as a junior here, right? And so what is there anybody, or do you feel like a sense of, you're kind of in that group now, right? Of you're not old by any means, but you're kind of you're respected, and you kind of have to respect them, and they respect you. Like, is there anybody, or is there a group that you've kind of fit into now that you're a little bit older?
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily. I think I know all the guys pretty well, and it might look weird for a younger 20-year-old person and going up to talk and hang out with a guy that's, I don't know, 50 or 60.
Sure.
But they respect me, and they're all great guys, and it's fun to run the series with them.
So you mentioned, you've got a full-time job now, right? And I think everybody gets to that, especially in drag racing, right? Drag racing is one of those sports where, and I've come to learn it over the past couple of years, right, where these are people who have 9-to-5 jobs. These people are doing it because they love the sport, not because they're making a bunch of money, not because there's a bunch of sponsors throwing money at them, right? Like, these are people who love the sport and would do this regardless. They would find a way to make this happen. And not to speculate, but I think there's probably, especially somebody who's as young as you, who could be doing this for a long time, right? There's a chance that you could go to work full time, and then you could get the itch, right, and want to be back out here. So, what do you have? Is there a goal, right? Because you've accomplished so much already, right? Is there something that you've kind of got on your bucket list that if you choose to come back and really pursue this, and what is there a goal that you have in mind?
Well, over the past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of the NHRA stuff. I think nowadays the big money bracket racing series is very prominent, and I've ran a couple of big money bracket races, nothing too big, like a couple of 20 granders and whatnot. But nowadays, there's racing for $100,000 this weekend at Galat, and there's a race in Louisville for $50,000, and couple $1.1 million races coming up, which is insane. So I guess I've got my feet wet in the class type racing, NHRA class type racing, and I'd like to move at some point to run those big money types of races. But it's really expensive to race those, and I pay my entry fees, and it's hard for me in the position that I am in right now to bring $2,000 to be able to go race on a weekend. So without losing my mind, and thinking if I lose this, I just lost $2,000. So maybe once I get older and more financially stable, and I could be able to pursue something like that.
So the last thing I want to ask you about, and this may be something where, as a youngster, right, racing out here, you may not have a ton of insight to it, but because you grew up as a junior here at Lucas Oil Raceway, one of the most important tracks in drag racing, right? And because you've won on the national stage, and you're so young, do you have any kind of is it, whether it be advice or is there any kind of perspective, right? As if somebody's watching, if a junior dragster right now is watching this, potentially looks up to you now as there's I think 30 some odd juniors here this weekend. And so is there any advice, any kind of insight, any kind of wisdom, whatever you want to call it, right? Like just an overview of what it takes to be successful, what it takes to do this, at a competitive level.
Yeah, it's just maintain your stuff, and you can beat a lot of people before you even get to the track. So if you can have good equipment that you can trust and you can work on and you can follow it, that gives you a great advantage. And just knowing your stuff, and just like whether it's cleaning it and finding loose bolts or whatnot, and that helps. And just if you're a young person, to be able to know your race car and work with your dad or whatnot, and learn how to pull the motor, learn how to change the carburetor. Just knowing how to mechanically work on the car is huge, and it helps you from a driver's perspective. That's
an interesting point, because we're in Indiana, right? I grew up playing basketball. People who play other sports, it's very technique oriented. It's very like muscle memory, and not to say there's not any of that here, but this is so different than other sports where there's not a ton of physical aspect to it. And so really knowing what you're doing, as opposed to the, and not that the repetition, you need to have the repetition and things like that, but it's so important to know, to have the knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely a sense of feel, whether it's knowing how you felt when you let go of the button, to launch, or whether you know how it feels when the car launched, whether it did what it did correctly, or and like the super gas and super comp, like knowing how it feels when it comes off the throttle stop. And, just knowing whether everything feels how it should, and getting in the routine of knowing what is correct and what is not.
And then being able to identify those things if you do feel
Mm-hmm.
something off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like just this past run, I was like, I knew that my idle was like way too high. I was like, because like when I stage, I like to give it a little bit of gas as I'm staging to help me stage a little bit easier. And like I knew it was too high there, which made it just feel weird. And so we lowered the idle there and be ready for the next round.
There you go. Well, thank you, first of all. Is there anything else you want to, I mean, I think we covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that covers everything.
Well, I appreciate it. This Racers Tribune series is to tell your stories, you know, both for you and for your families that are involved, but also for the people on the outside who are interested in drag racing, who live in drag racing, like we talked about. These people do it, you know, that are out here every weekend, the drag races around the Midwest. They do it because they love it, right? And they do it because they would be doing it regardless of the situation, regardless of what's going on in the world. And so we appreciate you telling your story to everybody, for everybody. You know, there's a junior out there looking up to you. Maybe they take something from this, and one day they're super gas not pushing, right? So we appreciate your time, and thanks for coming.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate what you guys are doing to shed light on the bracket racers that come out here and support Lucas Oil.
Thank you for watching another episode of the Racers Tribune, and don't forget, if you have a story to tell or if you know someone who does, head over to lucasoilraceway.com and find the Racers Tribune tab at the top of the page for more information on the Racers Tribune, what it is, and how you can be a part of it. Thank you, and see you next time.